constructing something like under the cohesive aesthetics of death metal, but have it, doing it in different ways and allowing for different feelings to come in. That's like progressive in its own way, I think.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If the three of you would be so kind, would you mind introducing yourselves?
I'm Brendan. I do guitar and vocals.
I'm Daniel, and I do guitars.
I'm Dennis, and I play the drums.
And guys, the name of your band, and how would you describe the music of your band?
I mean, we often default to Brendan because he's, the singer, and also he and Dan write all the music together. But we are called Gutvoid. Our music is death metal with a lot of other influences in it. Doom metal, progressive metal. Those are the main ones, but there's other stuff in there too.
I would say, if to deep dive, the first album we put out, which is that artwork, is maybe a lot more of the doom metal influence. But I think this album, Liminal Shrines, showcases more of the prog influences.
But also, when we say death metal, I would say death metals plural. It's like we're drawing from cosmic death metal. We're into newer bands like Tomb Mold. We're into old school Suffocation and Cannibal Corpse, and tech death metal like Martyr and whatever. So a lot of different death metals, a lot of different kinds of metal across the spectrum find their way in. We're not really
some death grind in there as well.
Sure.
We all listen to all kinds of music too, not just death metal. I think maybe that seeps in there somewhat. Because Brendan and I are big Alan Holdsworth fans, so some of his Rush. Some maybe his chord styles, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think try to blend everything that we listen to and influenced by. I think we incorporate it in some way.
So in the last few months, I've interviewed a few bands who are considered or consider their music progressive. I asked them this question, so I'll ask it from you. When we say progressive, what are we talking about? Are we talking about the way you guys integrate different styles into your form of death metal? Is it something about your song structures, the way they're non-traditional? Is it unusual time signatures that you guys use? What makes your music progressive?
I'd say it's a good mix of all of that. So, at the base, the prog that we are kind of draw inspiration from, it's much more I don't know if you'll say prog rock, prog metal. It's a lot of, like Dan mentioned, Rush, Dream Theater. They're heavily steeped, especially in the foundation of the songs and kind of starting points and little things that we try to integrate into the songs, riffs that kind of foreshadow things to come in the songs acting as a way to tell a story and the lyrics working with it. A lot of the foundations are prog in that sense, but I mean, we definitely don't shy away from using a lot of odd time signatures, not in a way, as here's a flashy section or here's a tech part, but more it's just the riff is, 3 parts of 5/6 or 5/8 and then, a 6/8 to tail end it. That's just, it's kind of, we use odd time signatures and kind of unconventional riffs kind of just as a general means of playing with the songs. But then the wider structure of the song isn't, again, it's not just, let's just throw a bunch of random riffs together. It serves a purpose. There's, thinking to this new album, the track of Smothering Sea, the beginning's almost like a mini overture of riffs to come in the song. And then when they do appear in the song, they're not exactly as they were at the beginning. They're slightly modified, or maybe there's a solo over top, or it's slightly changed, but it still utilizes that prog element of, we're bringing in this unique thing to start it, and then that comes later in the song to be fleshed out and built upon. And then, at the end of the song, it kind of bookends it together as well. It's drawing upon stuff that came earlier in the song, but just in a different light. Maybe it's a different time signature or has a different melody over top, or Den's playing something different on the drums to give it a totally different feel. So I think it's a good blend of when we talk about prog of, time signature wise, structuring wise, storytelling wise, influence wise. Dan or Dennis, you guys have any other thoughts or keep me honest here?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think from the prog aspect of our music, it's intricate in some sense. There's a lot of weird repeats, I guess, of riffs, or again, time changes. Not your usual structure in a song, A, B kind of thing. But yeah, I think what Brendan says is pretty accurate.
Yeah, I also think that to go back to your initial question, to say that a band is progressive is not necessarily to say that they're prog. Like, even though we like have a lot of prog influences for sure, it's like for us also just like thinking about music in a progressive way. Like, you can do things in different ways. Like, if you have different influences, you can bring them in, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean prog, or it doesn't have to mean musical complexity. Not that we don't love that as well. But, it's like the idea that like we can have more dynamics, and that we can bring in melody within a death metal song, and that we can, sometimes simplicity is progressive as well, because you're like, okay, we're riffing, we're soloing, we're doing all this stuff, and you're like, we need some time to just breathe, and giving listeners a chance to do that, and like, constructing something like under the cohesive aesthetics of death metal, but have it, doing it in different ways and allowing for different feelings to come in. That's like progressive in its own way, I think, even if it's not prog, or even if it's not complex in the same way.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about what brought you guys together and what your goals were when you first put this project together?
Yeah, I mean, it initially started with Dan and I. We've been playing music together for like over 20 years now, and we got together and said, hey, we haven't done something in a little while. Let's try a full-on death metal band. Before our bands were like a lot more. There was death metal, but there was a lot of prog. There was like some clean singing stuff. There was, things that kind of made it not quite true death metal. But we're like, let's do something where it's just, all, dank and gloomy and all growl vocals and everything like that. And so we came up with the idea of Gutvoid, which we were getting lunch one day and we were talking about it. And that name, one of us, Dan claims it was me. I claim it was him, but one of us came up with the name. But, we liked it because it's, we want something that was like, sci-fi, but also death metal and gross. So, like the void of outer space, but if it was made of guts, so like the gut void.
Right.
Plus, like, a little homage to Gorguts, Voivod bands that we liked, kind of like in the name there.
That's awesome.
And so, yeah, so it was kind of born there. And with that first EP, we initially were just like, yeah, we'll just do a studio project. We'll put it out, whatever. And then when it gained traction, Dan and I were like, oh, why don't we put a band together? Why don't we try playing live again? We hadn't done that, I think at that point, like over 10 years at least.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so Justin is an old friend of ours. We reached out to him on bass and he joined. And then Dennis, we didn't know any drummers, and we put out a Kijiji ad, and, to our very good fortune, he reached out. And, it was great finding a guy who's like-minded in influences and, also brought new influences to the table, which is great because it also adds to, kind of the sound of, as Dennis said, like bringing in different influences and kind of making what Gutvoid is. I don't know, Dennis, if you want to speak to, seeing that ad and what drew you to reach out to these three nerds.
Yeah, it's pretty random. I've played in bands for, since I was a kid, and I had just moved to Toronto. And so it was kind of the first time in my life since I was 12 years old that I wasn't really playing in bands. And I was like, what am I doing? I gotta do something here. And I didn't know a ton of people in Toronto. So I was like, it wasn't even Kijiji. I think it was Craigslist at that time. It might have been, no, maybe it was Kijiji.
Worse, greasier.
Anyways, so I was like, I literally just went and typed in death metal. And it's like, death metal band looking for drummer. I was like, how about this? And they had their demo up. I was like, how about that? Let's see what these nerds are like. I was like, I could tell right away. I'm like, this is awesome. This is heavy, but I can tell these guys are nerds. So we're going to get along,
Yeah.
Yeah. And it clicked pretty quickly. They told me, they're like, it's a really arduous, audition process. They're like, you're kind of the only guy who, but it really did. It just clicked. We had, I think the other thing about this was the first time we jammed was February 2020. And so we jammed a few times, and then March 2020, we're like, okay, this is it. This is a band. And then you can all remember what happened March 2020.
Right.
So we were very fortunate that through the nerdiness of the band and having, the capabilities of writing the music out and like recording demos in their homes, that they were able to send demos out, and we were able to, keep the momentum going somewhat, even though we weren't able to meet in person for the first, year and a half, 2 years of our band existence. So, yeah.
It always makes you laugh thinking about that timing.
Yeah.
So that first EP that you guys put out, that's not Dennis playing?
No, that's a program.
That was our very first drummer. Yeah, our first real drummer, superior drummer.
Superior drummer.
Okay, all right. Gotcha.
There's a program that we use, like when we demo stuff, and at the time, we didn't have a drummer, so we just figure we could get away with that. And
always the joke that if I don't, keep it up, I'm going to get fired and replaced by Superior Drummer.
Yeah. We did have a falling out with Superior Drummer, which is why we had to kick them out and look for Den. But we've amended ways. So Dennis, you never know. It could come back.
I mean, so many jobs are being taken over by AI. I wonder, like, at what point we're going to have a AI Superior Drummer who just schedules band practice for you and writes the songs for you.
Don't put this into the ether, man.
Well, I mean, we know that's happening, like AI music's happening, right? But one of the most exciting things with this band was when we finally did get to play live, and like when, restrictions were lifted and we're all vaccinated and we were able to get in a room together and be sweaty and like in close proximity and like loud and visceral and like the sounds shaking your body. It was like, oh yeah, this is what we've been working for the past couple of years. So that was exciting. And we're trying to play live more and more as much as we can with the new record. And so the like coming from those those humble beginnings of basement recordings and then like getting on these stages and doing it together, like as 4 humans on stage with however many people, 4 other humans in the audience or sometimes more. But yeah, you know what I'm saying. The live aspect of it is so important to us as well.
Yeah, it's the best.
Daniel, do you want to say anything else about bringing the band together?
Yeah, so when we did bring it together, it was the funny things. We just wanted just to play, like put a band together, like just me and Brendan. And the cool things, we didn't expect anything to really happen. And then all of a sudden Blood Harvest reached out, I don't know, a couple of weeks after we did our EP. It's slowly been growing organically since then. And that's been great.
I'd like to discuss the way you guys write songs. How does it usually start for you guys? Do you start with riffs? Do you start with like kind of a riff map or an idea of how you want a song to flow?
And I think it depends. Like, Dan, so half the songs Dan and I kind of write kind of individually, and then half Dan and I write together. And we do it all like kind of on Guitar Pro, and then when it's kind of done, we'll we'll demo it and send it to like Dennis and Justin and get their thoughts. And obviously, Dennis, all the drum parts are 1,000 times better when he does them and adds his own stuff to it. So it's really just, we give bass line, drums. It's more like, it's just this feel or this rhythm or whatever. But, sometimes it is just, Dan, I'll let you speak to yours, but for me, I'll be like showering and I'll hear a riff in my head. I'll be like, oh, that's cool. Like that's an idea. Like on this album, Leave Me Beyond the Sleeping Eye, I remember I was showering and I kind of thought I'd be of like, oh, what if like one guitar played and held a note, and then like the next beat, another guitar played, and then the bass played, and then everyone hit that note. It was just kind of that idea. And I was like, oh, that's neat. And then I came down and just kind of figured that out. And then that kind of led the rest of the song just to kind of be written. Other times it's like, we have maybe like on Durance, we had 5 songs. We actually had 6 songs. Swamp Consumed, which is on our latest EP, Breathing Obelisk, that was going to be on the first album. But then a little too long, it didn't flow with the songs. And so we said, well, let's move that. We'll do something with it. And so there was this one track that kind of needed to be added, and that was Skeletal Glyph. And I remember I was like, we need something like kind of shorter, aggressive, something like that. And that kind of led to how that song was written. I think I came up with that first riff, and then it passed off to Dan, and he added to it. And then we kind of like, it came really quickly. And then that song kind of came to be, but based upon like what it needed to fill in the flow of the album. And so for me at least, it kind of depends, either it's like a kernel of something, like I get an idea, or I hear a song that influences me. I'm like, oh, I should do a riff kind of like that or something, or kind of servicing its role in the album. Yeah, I don't know, Dan, if you tackles differently.
Pretty much the same. It can come from almost anywhere. Like you hear something in your head, like you said, listen to a song. Sometimes for me, it's like a rhythm, a drum beat. I might start the song like that, or it's just I pick up the guitar and something comes out, and it could be half a song or a whole song, and I'll send it to Brendan, and he might take out a riff and put one in, or like again we work together on it, and he'll rearrange it, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of collaboration. Or sometimes Brendan will, like this album, he wrote I think 90% of it just happens. So we just let it happen naturally. So whoever writes what, or when we come together, show it to Justin and Den, and people think.
Yeah,
it's pretty collaborative.
But the main thing is like even if it's like it's the starting point is Dan or myself or whatever. It's not the song isn't the song until like kind of everyone puts their mark on it. Like it really is like the whole's greater than what is it the whole is greater than the parts. I know I'm butchering it. Yeah. But it really is that. It's like, all 4 of us make the song, make the album. There's not like a big ownership of like, well, that one was Dan's, that one was mine, but it's whatever. It's the whole of the band that really brings it together and brings life to it.
So if I'm understanding you, a lot of the composition and the arranging happens at the Guitar Pro stage, and the song structures are mostly in place by the time Dennis and Justin hear them?
Yeah, I'd say, pretty much. Yeah, we use, I think, Guitar Pro pretty much exclusively for everything.
Yeah.
I might sometimes demo something in Cubase without writing it out and then go back and put it, but I'd say 90% of it, it's all written in Guitar Pro. The structure's pretty much there. And then, again, the 4 of us come together and we all agree on it.
Yeah. Like I'm always start with Guitar Pro and kind of built it there, and then I'll demo the songs like in Pro Tools with I'll use Superior Drummers just for the demo, and like I'll do like bass guitar and even demo vocals and everything. But if there's parts, it's thankfully there hasn't been much structural changes at that point, but it's always like up for, I know we've had some discussions of like, should this part be different, or like, especially on feels, like I know a lot of times, Dennis, you'll come with an idea of like, oh, maybe this feel, or maybe this should have like this, or, my favorite one is on For We Are Many, which is on our Breathing Obelisk EP. The second verse of that, like Dennis, this is really cool ride pattern that throws off the blast beat. And I did not come up with that. There's no way I could have come up with that. But Dennis, you were like, I think this would be cool. And I was like, yeah, it's fucking awesome. It's like one of the best parts of the song. And so, yeah, like structurally, it's kind of set there generally. And then again, we all come together with the demo and then kind of build on it to make it the final product.
Dennis, once you receive and listen to these demos, what's your process for coming up with the drum patterns?
So that process has evolved a little bit over the course of, I guess, well, we're already working on the new record, like the second part of the Liminal Shrines, which will be recorded. We're recording the drums in a couple of weeks, actually. No, a few weeks, in about a month. Yeah. So the process for me, I am a very methodical person as well, which is really nice working with these guys because they're writing. One thing I really admire is this combination of inspiration and then like discipline and being calculated. So it's like they've got these ideas and then they put in the work to flesh them out. So there's always new material coming and stuff for me to work on. So the way I work, they send me the charts. I like to print them out and put them into big like visual scores. I'll listen to them with Superior Drummer. I'll listen to them with no drums whatsoever. And then I'll start to create my parts, sort of see how much I'm going to change from what the program parts are, how much is going to stay the same. And then I'll ask, after I've been working on them for a few weeks, I'll decide where I want the click track to be. And I'll send them back to them. I'll be like, I need click tracks in these places. And then I start working on them with click tracks with no Superior Drummer. And then after I start to like internalize them a bit, then we'll start to meet together in the jam space and work on them. And they might be like, okay, this is working here, this is not working here, why don't we try this? And then it becomes more of like a real band thing before we get into the studio and do the drums.
So at the time we're having this conversation, the second Gutvoid album will be released at the end of the week. It's called Liminal Shrines, and it'll be out through Profound Lore Records. Tell me a little bit about your intentions with this album. Did you go into this wanting to expand on what you've done in the past and maybe even bring in some more influences that you hadn't used before?
Excuse me. Yeah, definitely. Like I remember after Durance and when we decided what Breathing Obelisk was going to be and we kind of had those songs, I think we were all talking like what for the next album. At that point it was we hadn't come up with the idea of like doing the kind of connected split album. But we were like, what influence do we want to draw on? Like, what do we want more of? And we're like, okay, well, we want more solos, a bit more of like a death metal, like Gorguts influence. I remember like them specifically, that name getting thrown out, but then also like more kind of proggy, like not, techie, but not like tech death, like not, like scales or whatever, but like technical, like, proggy technical, different time signatures, weird kind of riffs or weird structures. And so, like Dan said, by no intention, just by how it fleshed out timing wise and stuff. Like, I happened to write this album and had that idea in mind of like, okay, like that's the kind of stuff that we want to focus on. And so, this album definitely, I think, leans more into those prog tendencies and kind of, despite that, is a lot more, I'd say, like aggressive compared to Durance. Like Durance, I think it's more, it still has like its aggressive and proggy parts, but I think it has a bit of that like doomier, new old school death metal kind of vibe. Whereas this one, obviously it still sounds like Gutvoid, but I think it builds on that and has a lot more of those prog elements, a lot more of like, a bit more intense parts. Definitely, I would say more, and Dennis, keep me honest here, I think more blast beats throughout it as well, and a bit more intense drumming wise, a lot more room for Dennis to stretch drumming wise as well. Like, I know, as Dennis mentioned earlier, like it's the learning process, everything has evolved. And with that, I think the writing process has evolved for us as well, because now we know the four of us, we know our strengths, we know what we like, we know what we bring to the table, and it kind of helps. Be like, oh, like sweet, like let's run with that a bit more. Like I know for this album and the next album, I purposely built in a lot more sections for Dennis to like kind of have interesting drumming or drum solos, or like do a lot more fills, just to really stretch and build on the skills that I know he has. Because yeah, he's a fantastic death metal drummer, but I know at heart he's a fantastic prog drummer as well. So you can hear some Neil Peart influences and Portnoy influences and all that, which just makes Dan and I very happy.
I pretty much agree. I think it's showcasing like the sound we are trying to achieve. It basically it's a progression of Durance. We still maintain some doom metal aspect, that old school, I guess, sound, but we're bringing in the other sounds we really love too, which again the prog, which we can't help, just natural, and then just mesh it together. And I think it pretty much shows what we're trying to achieve.
Dennis, as somebody who heard what the guys were working on before the rest of us, what was your take on what they were attempting, what they were trying to accomplish with this?
I mean, it felt, even before we started playing it together, it felt more like a cohesive band effort, if that makes sense. Because like Brendan's saying, he was writing with the group dynamic in mind. It's not just like, oh, well, this is how Dennis is going to play this or whatever. But it's like we had, when they were writing for the initial demo, and then even a lot of the first record, I guess all the first record, actually, it was before we'd played live, right? So it's like having played live so much after the first record, it's like we figure out how we feed off each other, how like Justin and I link up as a rhythm section, and like how I approach the drums differently than Brendan's programmed parts. And then, how Brendan and Dan played together live and trading off solos and all these things, and like things that we found that we really enjoyed doing live. Like there's certain songs that we would play more and more, like Altar Lich and stuff we played almost every show. And Murmurations from the split that we did, that was another one that was a live staple, and we've actually just brought back. But yeah, so figuring out what works with the four of us, like as a real band, not just sort of theoretically, but actually, physically when we're playing together. I think that, to me, it felt like this was geared more towards that, like what's going to work as a real 4-piece band playing these songs. And so that made it much more. I mean, also, having this is the second full length, and then having the EP as well. It felt more natural for me going into it. I'm like, oh yeah, this is not like, okay, what's going on? It's like, okay, I'm getting back into it again. I'm like, here we go again. This is exciting, and now I can focus on pushing myself and getting into these parts and getting into the song structures without sort of figuring out what's going to work and what's not going to work sort of top down level. It's like, okay, like we're getting the vibe, we're getting the feel, and it's like, now how do we progress with that?
Brendan, you mentioned something about one of the songs introducing the riffs and then bringing them in later on in a different form, which is kind of a classical composition kind of way of arranging and creating compositions. Do you guys have a music school background? Do you guys study music theory or anything like that?
I don't. I played piano for a long time, like when I was a kid, but I was terrible at theory, had a terrible ear, didn't get very far. And then that was that. And it's the closest thing to theory is Guitar Pro for me and tabs. So I am the opposite of that, unfortunately. I'll pass off to these guys.
I'm pretty much the same. I don't have any background in anything. I just self-taught. I love theory. I know about it, but when I write, I don't use it. It's like, I guess the style Brendan and I have, we just write. We don't really think, this note's moving to this note. It's a diminished chord. It's going to resolve for stuff. We don't really do that. It's just from listening to all the bands that we listen to, that's coming out naturally.
Dan, I remember when it was a long time ago, you were like, yeah, Dimebag used to just be like, if it sounds good, it sounds good. You didn't care about,
Sounds good, yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like that.
That's pretty much, if it sounds like, I'll send a riff to him and he'll be, oh, that's awesome. Or I'll say the same thing and we just get that feeling. But theory-wise, like our schooling, just self-taught, really.
But Dennis.
Yeah, I would also. So I'm a little of a music school nerd, and I've got quite a music theory background, which is funny because I'm the drummer and I'm not writing the stuff in this band. But see, I would push back. I think both Brendan and Dan have a lot of theory. They just don't necessarily name it the same way that somebody with a formal music theory background. Like if you say, okay, I've got a diminished chord and I want that to resolve into whatever. Like you have that specific language. These guys are doing this. Like there's a lot of things that they do really consistently and that they've drawn from really consistently from their influences, and they understand it from their influences, and they understand it conceptually, even if they don't name it the same way. Like, I'm not giving away anything here. You can see Dan's shirt. They're big Dream Theater fans, and I'm a big Dream Theater fan too. And they'll be like, okay, this is something we wanted, a vibe from, and they'll like name a song, and they'll be like, we're drawing on that sort of harmonic influence. And I'm like, yeah, that's like, there's a theoretical concept there. They're not just copying the chord progression or not just copying the solos, but they're getting those vibes, and they're doing that by either using the same scales or using the same pitch class collections in different ways, even if they're not calling it that, right? And there's a ton of rhythmic, like odd time signatures and changing time signatures are not random, right? There's a lot of very specific structure, and there's like music theory articles that like describe, for example, how Dream Theater does it. There's one that I remember I studied in a theory of rhythm and meter class that I took one time, and I see those patterns consistently in Brendan's writing specifically. Dan's got a slightly different approach, but I remember I pointed it out to him. I'm like, it's called an ABAC amp. I won't get into the nerdiness of it, but like, you're doing this and then something else and then this and then something else extended. And he's like, oh yeah, I do that all the time. Like it's a Dream Theater trick, It's not just Dream Theater, but they do it in this very specific way that Brendan does all the time. As well. And it's like, he understands that conceptually and theoretically, and it makes its way into the music, even if he's not sitting and labeling it that same way. And so it's like, it's not just random. It's very sort of focused and methodical, and understanding that and like discussing that as a group, even if we're not necessarily using the same language word at first, it's like we got on the same page about it. And that's nice because then we have the structure that we like, okay, this is something we like and we want to reuse. And then also like, okay, what are we going to do to make it different this time? And I remember like that specifically, we talked a lot about, how to use different time signatures and different phrasings on the first record. And then we had some new ways of doing it for this new record.
I'm curious at what point do the lyrics come in? Do you have themes in mind before you start writing songs? Or is this something that develops after the music is finished?
Definitely, like the actual lyrics themselves are after the music gets done. I'm not someone who can kind of write lyrics and then be like, okay, great, like, yeah, let's get a song going for these lyrics. I'm much more, I need to hear the song first. I need to kind of think of, well, what's the feeling or what's the atmosphere of the song? What's being evoked in me from hearing it? And like, what's the flow of the song as well? Because I'm really, and hopefully it works out, but I really try to strive to have the lyrics and the music work together to tell the story. Like I don't want to have aggressive lyrics over like a non-aggressive part, or vice versa. Like I want to have, if the song has like some weird kind of technical section, I want that to like work with the story, and like the lyrics leading up to it, I want to like lead into that to make it seem like it's working. Like Spell Reliquary is a good example. It's songs about somebody who, travels to find this like ancient book that like, will transform their being. And the part right before the weird kind of like techie martyry section, it's them kind of like getting lost in that quest, and like that is supposed to like represent the quest itself. And so, the lyrics are something that, I really want to help. I want to help service the song itself. And so it's something that comes afterwards. With respect to themes, with the exception of like Breathing Obelisk, which kind of we went and saying, okay, I love reading like, sci-fi and fantasy, and that album, I want to pay homage to like 4 great sci-fi books that I'd read recently. And so each of those songs are based on that. But otherwise, it usually starts with, like on Durance, it was more just, okay, let's do some cool like sci-fi fantasy horror stuff, listen to the songs. This seems to kind of work with the music. And then I started writing it out and then kind of see how it vibed. With Liminal Shrines in the next one, because we kind of determined that it was going to be 2 related albums, like a concept album, not in the sense of like Lamb Lies Down on Broadway concept album, but more just like an album that's tied conceptually, more like in the Rush sense, like how Neil Peart used to take albums and say, well, this album, like Power Windows, we're going to explore power, counterparts, we're going to explore like opposites. And each song kind of dealt with that in a different way. It's much more like that. And so this one, I'd written some lyrics for a couple of the songs, but then when we decided to do this kind of connected double album thing, I started to think, well, like what's kind of a thread that's in these songs, and kind of the ideas that I have percolating of like what could be maybe a cool song idea, and that the exploration of change, like change of states, change of beings, whether it's a good change that you bring upon yourself or a bad one that occurs from your own doing, or change that is brought onto you without any of your will. It just occurs upon you, whether it's good or bad. That kind of seemed to be coming out in the lyrics and the ideas that I had. And so that's the exploration on these 2 albums, but obviously through, like a sci-fi fantasy horror lens. So yeah, it's some ways dependent, or at least, in this instance, and I guess in Breathing Obelisk, it was kind of had an idea of like what of the overall theme was going to be, and that helped drive the lyrics, but definitely music first and lyrics come after that.
So when you say story, not necessarily a narrative from beginning to end, but like a collection of stories that share this kind of like cosmic horror or sci-fi theme.
Yeah, or more like it's a collection of stories that explore the concept of change, and good or bad change, but through the lens of sci-fi or fantastical horror. We're not talking about real world examples, or like more, say, like philosophic explorations of it. It's more like there's some strange structure built on the moon, Umbriel, and scientists go to check it out, but then they become entranced by this living creature that resides in it, and it draws them in and like changes them. So it's like, oh yeah, like there's change. There's like change that you go seeking something, but you are drawn in it. It changes you against your will. You thought you would go and gain knowledge or explore this thing, but instead it changes you, whether it's good or bad. But it brought that change upon, and so it has that idea of like, oh, I like a change that I sought something out, but it's affected on me and changed me in a way that I didn't expect or didn't necessarily want. But through like some like alien artifact that draws some like scientists in and changes them and makes them like cosmic beings or whatever. So all the songs are much, they're in that vein. Like some are more horror, some are more like fantastical, but it's all kind of that at the root of it. It's, well, what's the change that's occurring? And then just being told through kind of a lens of, sci-fi fantasy.
I mean, the scientists discovering the artifact on the moon and changing it, it sounds very Kubrickian. It sounds very 2001. Was that an influence for you?
Not specifically. I mean, obviously that movie's incredible, but that, I don't think what. There wasn't anything specific with Umbriel's Door that really influenced me. I think I like the idea of, oh, it'd be cool if like there was some like artifact on the moon. Maybe like it's in no ways it the same, but the movie Event Horizon, there's a black hole by Neptune. Not quite the same, but probably a bit of that was just there that kind of like helped with the start like of the feel or the mood, the lyrics for that song. But definitely some of the songs are a bit more subtle, I guess, in their horror or the affect, and it's not as in your face like Delivered to the Altar Lich on Durance, which is like literally, oh yeah, someone's like captured by some evil sect and brought to a necromancer and then just sacrificed. That one's like on the nose, purposely on the nose, but that's like almost like a mid-era Cannibal Corpse-esque song, if you will. Whereas these maybe have a bit more subtlety in their, in the horror aspects, but they're all like, yeah, in sci-fi or fantastical in some way.
Is writing science fiction something that you're interested in outside of the band context? Is it something that you're interested in pursuing creatively?
I used to write. There's a period of my life when I had a lot more time where I was writing. I wrote a lot of fiction, and I would love to. I come up with ideas, and I'm like, oh, I'd love to write this. I'd love to put a short story collection together of certain songs in Gutvoid and just kind of flesh them out because I think they'd be cool stories. But a mix of, I don't have the time, it's unfortunate, but time is a commodity and it's tough to come by. And also I'm pretty rusty. So I'd love to do it in a perfect world. That'd be great. Cause I love writing, but it is an extremely arduous task. So, maybe one day.
Where did you guys end up tracking your parts?
The first thing that we record for the albums is always the drums. We track that at, Brenny, you're gonna have to correct me. It's Boxcar.
Yeah.
Like,
Boxcar Sound.
I have a Boxcar Sound. I've got a bad memory for names. Boxcar Sound. It's like I can remember how to drive there, but Boxcar Sound with Sean, and we get in. It's in Hamilton, which is, anybody who's not from here, it's just outside Toronto. And so once you get outside Toronto, it's like things start to open up. You have a little bit more space. Toronto is like this big, dense city, and so if you want a bigger studio without, paying with your kidneys, then you go a little bit outside. And so it's this big, giant loft. It's this huge, huge room, and it's always a good time because I get in there and I set up my drums, and we've got this whole space, and it's just me in there. And then the guys are in the other room just watching me, and I've got all this like big booming space, and we spend time getting sounds, and then I've got the clicks and the scratch tracks in my headphones, and like everybody's there, and we're just like talking through and seeing how it's going. But so that's what we do first. We start with the drums, and then I'll pass it on to these guys to talk about the rest.
I guess the guitars and the bass are tracked at home. So Brendan and I both have, I guess you could call them home studios or little project studios. And we can record, he uses Pro Tools and I have Cubase. So we can do that all on software. And then vocals, Brendan, you can speak to that.
Yeah, I get to go back to Boxcar Sound as well and do the vocals there, which is also awesome. Sean Pearson is a great guy to work with, and he knows how to get the best performance out of me. We work like really efficiently. I think I've done Durance there, Breathing Obelisk there, this album there, to the next one there, and it's going and like every time I've done all the vocals in one half-day session, and then I'll go back and do like some punch-ins, maybe some parts I don't like, maybe a part I want to change, but like effectively like 95% get done in one session. It's great working with him because it's super efficient. He knows how to like work fast and like how to get the most out of me and everything. So yeah, so it's great going back there. And then guitar wise, we don't do any reamping. As Dan mentioned, we all have our home studio, so we have software that we use for all the tones. In a perfect world, it'd be great to be able to reamp, but it's costly, and you can get great tones with software, so we use those.
Do you double track your vocals?
No, I don't. Like, there's a few parts where there might be like a double scream, usually just for effect, but generally no. It's all single track vocals. It's something that I remember when Dan and I were talking initially with this band that I wanted to go into is, I didn't want to do a ton of like crazy vocal layering or anything, which I've in the past with prior bands or with like side projects, which I've done, but this one we just want to keep it, I wouldn't say simple is the right word because I don't think our music's simple, but at least like the vocal wise, they're like, no, I just want like basically just one voice. Maybe there's, tail end carryover between verses at times, kind of like, Opeth style, but for the most part, it's all just single tracking.
I'm just curious. I'm sort of doing a survey to see how many bands actually do double tracking. For whatever reason, I thought that it was more common than it actually is. It sounds like most people are doing single tracks.
Yeah, I feel like it's probably, and maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, but kind of genre specific as well, Like, I feel like I'd be very surprised to hear if a lot of, contemporary bands that we kind of get put together with, like in that, for lack of a better term, like old school death metal kind of vibe. Like, I bet all of them single track, as well. Like, I'd be very surprised, but I bet you in, more tech death or, like that kind of like leaning into that like deathcore stuff, I bet there's a lot of double tracking there, or at least I would guess that. So yeah, and I'm using like just two examples there, but I bet you it's very genre specific, or you're doing the survey. Maybe I'm totally off the mark here.
No, I think you're right. I mean, certain bands you can kind of tell because their vocals are almost more like spoken word shouting. Do you know what I mean? And so just because it's not like a very, it's not on the beat, you can tell that it's probably really hard to double track those vocals. I feel like maybe with the Death Doom kind of stuff, there's probably more double tracking, just so that they can get that like very epic, big sound. It's interesting. I'm speaking to, you're wearing a Reeking Aura shirt. I'm speaking to the guys next week.
Oh,
And so I'll ask
Will.
Bill if he double tracks his vocals, because his vocals are fucking sick.
Yeah, Will's my vocal hero. He's a friend. You know, I talk to him all the time. He actually has helped me develop some of my vocal style, and he guest vocaled on our first album. Yeah, he's a fantastic guy.
Yeah, all around good dudes in that band.
Yeah.
Dennis, do you want to say anything about capturing your drum sound?
I'm pretty old school in my approach to the drums. Like and that's one of the reasons I like recording a boxcar. Like I would like a really good acoustic sound. We've got more room sound than I think a lot of death metal bands do. And that comes from, again, a lot of the non-death metal that we listen to. So yeah, we also, again, speaking to that, we like a lot of dynamics. Like we've had discussions in like mixing where like, oh, there's certain parts where it's like, and again, I love brutal death metal. I love tech death metal, when they've got like the snare, everything just like, so you're blasting and the blast is just as loud as the backbeat parts. But, we're like, what does this actually sound like, when it's played by people? And it's like, you feel the blast differently when you allow those dynamics to come through. And it's like, it forces me to like push hard. It's like, if I want it to hit harder, I actually have to physically hit harder. And then when we want the space and we want the room sound and we want the natural reverb and things like that, then we can let that come in there. So yeah, the drum sound, we try to do something that's, maybe Brendan can correct me, but we go for like largely consistent sounds. It's not like, obviously there's some compression and that kind of stuff, but it's not a lot of like, okay, we raise the snare here and then we bring it down here and then the kicks are all quantized in this, where it's like, it's much more like, okay, we're trying to capture performances and trying to capture the acoustic sound of the drums and the feel and dynamics of, a person playing the drums, which is not to say that, they're all one take or whatever, but that's more the aesthetic that we're going for. And that's kind of in all the bands I've played in, that's always been my aesthetic largely.
I 100% agree with that. We always want Dennis's performance to come out, and we want to have like all the dynamics there as well, right? So we want to keep that natural kind of dynamic, not like, as Dennis mentioned, like, oh, well, let's raise it here and then drop it here. It's like, no, like he played it this way. It's going to have parts that will like pop out more than others, but that's because he played it that way. And so we want that to kind of come out. It's like when we talked about what the drums sound like on this album, it sounds like, crisp and tight, but very organic as well. And I think that kind of is what we want to go for. We want to sound like you can hear all the intricacies and the nuances with every instrument and what everyone's doing, because it's pretty dense music, especially sometimes it's very dense. But we don't want to sound mechanical. We want to have life. And I think that starts at the basis is at the drums, and then it's everything built on that.
Soul
can you guys tell me about working with Greg Dawson? How he got involved with the album and what you wanted him to bring to the sound, the finished sound of the album?
So yeah, when we were talking about, who we wanted to mix the album, we threw out some names, but Greg Dawson was at the top of the list really because of what he did on Hive Mind Narcosis, which is the last Fantafaxaf album, which sounds incredible. And kind of what Dennis and I were saying, like, you listen to that album, there's a ton of stuff going on, and it's like super technical and super weird, but you can hear everything, and it's really clear and crisp, but still has life. Like, it's not a sterile sounding album. It's very organic, but you pick up all the nuances. And that was really what we're like, when we were thinking about, okay, well, what do we want this to sound like? Like Durance, I think it sounds great, but it's boomy. It's like, it's kind of thick and kind of suffocating a bit, which is great for, like, I think the tone we were going for in the songs on that. But for this one, especially leaning a bit more into like the proggier elements and more technical nuances, we wanted something that was really bright and crisp. And so that's kind of why we kind of went with Greg. I don't know if I'll pass it off from here if anyone else has thoughts.
Yeah, pretty much the sentiment is capturing a natural sound. Like, our music's not set to a grid or anything like that. So even if we do play to a click, it can, somewhat deviate a little bit. So that's the human aspect coming through, which I think plays to our sound. Especially we're into old prog rock, like the old Rush records. They sort of, they're not perfectly in time, that kind of thing. Very natural sounding. And I think it suits this album perfectly. Because again, Dennis is playing I would say is more nuanced in the sense he's doing stuff with the hi-hat, like a Neil Peart kind of thing. Playing a hi-hat, maybe some ghost notes, and more intricate parts than, say, Durance. So that comes through more, and there's more layering, like with Brendan with acoustics on this. So those really came through with his production. So
working with Greg himself was also like a fantastic. Like, he first reach out, he was happy to work with us, happy that we liked his work on the Fantafaxaf album. And yeah, he like super easy process, super friendly guy. We'd send him the stuff. He was very responsive. There's like little things that we heard, and he was totally happy to like take our comments. It wasn't like I don't know. Some people might be like, well, you get like 2 rounds of comments and then that's it. He was like, no, like, tell me, open ears, and like, happy to like change things, and like, so very, very easy to work with. Very, very fortunate to work with him because he really brought life to this album more than I could have expected. So
I've spoken to a number of engineers over the years, and the one character trait they all seem to have in common is incredible patience. Dennis, do you want to say anything about working with Greg and the finished production of the album?
I mean, I wasn't working with him directly because in the mixing process, it was more Brendan doing the back and forth. But yeah, I in terms of like how it came out, I'm thrilled with it for sure.
Daniel, to your point, I mean, you guys brought up a lot of your influences in the doom metal and classic prog space. To me, this album it almost leans more into that doom direction. It's very open. There's a lot of space. No pun intended, but there's a lot of space to the sound. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd say so. There's, especially, like, again, I mentioned the acoustics. There's the last song has a very open sounding. I don't know if you're familiar with the band called Augury. They have a sort of, not necessarily doom, but they do have like a spacey sort of sound to them. And I think, again, his production lent it to those parts. They're really open, vast sounding. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
So by the time people hear this episode, the album will be out. What are your plans as far as tours, festival appearances, one-off shows, and things like that?
No.
We don't have...
Yeah, unfortunately.
We don't have big touring plans as of yet. We've got a bunch of local shows lined up. We're working on a short run for the summer. Can't announce it yet, but it's in the works. But yeah, lots of local shows. We're working on some longer things, but we don't have any giant tours lined up for the moment. So we'll have to wait on those announcements, unfortunately.
I mean, ideally, what's your preference for playing shows? Do you guys like to do short runs? Would you like to go over to Europe? Do you like doing festivals?
Yeah, festivals, Europe, Western Canada, Eastern Canada, maybe the States in a little while.
When things calm down a little bit, right?
Yeah, like, a few years or so. But yeah, right now just
maybe no festivals in the Middle East right now.
Yeah, just locally right now. But we would love to play a festival like in Europe or something like that, or a small run. Definitely open to that if we're lucky enough. The opportunity arises, then yeah, for sure.
So, by the time people hear this episode, Liminal Shrines will be out through Profound Lore Records. Dennis, Daniel, and Brendan, please tell everyone listening how they can order the new album. What's the best way to get it?
We got our Bandcamp page. I think it's Gutvoid Official at Bandcamp. I'm not 100% sure, but we're on Bandcamp.
You can Google it, you'll find it.
Yeah, Profound Lore, obviously, which he'll be working with other labels all around the world. So if you're in all parts of the world, you can get it anywhere. It'll be available worldwide. Yeah, it's so Profound Lore is putting out the vinyl and the CD, and then Gurgling Gore is a record label from Maine in the States. He's a great guy. Brett and I worked with him on our side projects. And he's putting out the cassette version. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, I think Spotify, I guess all the streaming platforms we're available on.
Yeah. Yeah, but definitely the best way, if you want to get a vinyl, Profound Lore, and if you want to get the tapes, go Gurgling Gore. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys mentioned the vinyl version. I believe there are 2 variants. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a yellow-orange and then a red, and they're both incredible.
And you guys mentioned your Instagram. As far as merch, is everything going through the Bandcamp page or through Profound Lore? Or do you guys have your own merch store?
The merch will be, I'm pretty sure it's all going to be handled through Profound Lore.
Okay.
We do have our own merch on Bandcamp. We had a first run of t-shirts for the EP, and there's some stuff for Durance, and we just released a new shirt from Breathing Obelisk, I believe it was. We just released a new shirt for there, so that stuff you can find on our Bandcamp.
Guys, it was really nice chatting with you, and I really appreciate how generous you were with your time. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else you want the listeners to know?
Yeah, just thanks for our support over the years. Yeah, pretty much it. Hope you enjoy the new album.
Dennis?
Check out some Indonesian bands. Dead Squad, Noxa, Siksa Kubur, Mouthless, Belantar, Burger Kill, Asphyxiate, Gore Infamous, Just Sad. Just keeps going. Check out some Indonesian bands. Honestly, they've been a huge influence on me as a musician as well. But yeah, enjoy the record. We're so excited that it's out. Hope to see you at a show.
Yeah, same. Appreciate the support. Hope you enjoy the record. If you like this one, you'll like the next one as well. They flow well. And, also listen to some Rush.
And if you have time,
never go wrong with Rush.
Excellent. Working Men, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.